Tonight on KQED Newsroom, what was it like to be President Joe Biden's campaign strategist and his sister? Our special guest this evening, Valerie Biden Owens, reflects on what it was like to grow up Biden in her new book. And California public schools continue to struggle under the pandemic as enrollment drops again. In sports, Alyssa Nakken makes history as the first woman coach on the field. All this and more of the week's big stories with our panel of reporters. Plus, we get a blast from our computer history past in this week's look at something beautiful. Coming to you from KQED headquarters in San Francisco, this Friday, April 15th, 2022. Hello and welcome to the show. This is KQED Newsroom and I'm Priya David Clemens. For close to a decade, California public school enrollment has been on a slow decline. This week, we learned that enrollment has dropped below 6 million students for the first time since 2000. While some families have relocated, some have chosen to homeschool, and others have enrolled in private schools, education experts say that doesn't account for the significant drop in numbers, and they're perplexed as to where the students have gone. Here now to discuss these changes in enrollment and to talk about the week's other top stories in the Golden State, our KQED Morning Edition host, Brian Watt, and San Francisco Chronicle senior political writer, Joe Garofoli. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here today.
Good to be here.
So, Brian, let's start with you. You've taken a little bit of a look at these school enrollment numbers and this mystery of what's happening. We're talking about both public and charter school enrollment numbers have dropped significantly.
Well, and like you said, it is a mystery. We know that this has been declining for years, even before the pandemic. We do know that the pandemic ratcheted it up a little bit. But if you look at the numbers, if you look at 200 and roughly 10,000 public school students, fewer public school students than there were a couple of years ago, where have they gone? Not everyone knows exactly. They didn't go to charter schools. Some went to private schools, but not nearly as many as anybody would think. So this is what people are trying to figure out. We know that some schools are seeing problems with chronic absenteeism. That's something the state wants to do something about, wants to give school district resources to go out and find students who just have fallen through the cracks and just aren't going to school.
Okay, let's turn to a local school story here in San Francisco, Lowell High School. This is a public school, academically rigorous, made big national headlines in this past year when they dropped their requirements for testing to be admitted to Lowell High School. Now, the principal, who's only been there a year, started in the fall, has resigned. And he wrote a public letter this week saying that he was leaving the San Francisco Unified School District solely based on my desire to apply my passion for education in a district that values its students and staff through well-organized systems, fiscal responsibility, and sound instructional practices as a path towards equity. Joe, some pretty scathing words there.
Very scathing words, and it has an outsized impact because it's coming from the principal of Lowell. It's a high-profile school, and remember, some of the concerns about the admissions requirements there are what fed into the recall of the school board members in San Francisco, and that was a nationally watched story. So this is a big deal.
And I will say, as someone married to a Lowell alum who went to college with some Lowell alums and hangs out, the alums are watching this, and you see a principal who's been at it for a year during this year of change saying, you know what, I can't keep doing this. That says something.
It certainly shows that there are more problems there. You know, we are going to be actually airing a documentary here on KQED on May 2nd. We're also hosting a live event, and it's specifically about Lowell High School and about sort of the struggles of high school and the rigors of it and then getting into college. And that should be an interesting event if you get a chance to check that out. Brian, we're hearing more and more about COVID cases right now. It does seem like this new variant is bringing it to the fore again. You recently spoke with a doctor from UCSF about the current state of affairs. So what should we be concerned about?
Well, he definitely thinks this is an interesting time. This is Dr. Peter Chin Hong.
May we live in interesting times, right?
And we certainly do, according to Dr. Peter Chin Hong. This weekend in particular, gatherings are up, if you will. We have Easter, we have Passover, we have Ramadan, and we have Coachella. If music is your religion, people are going to come together. As far as case rates, They're up about 25%, which sounds like a lot in a place like the Bay Area, but right now that translates into a couple hundred new cases each day. You got to remember, there was a time when we were seeing 20,000 cases a day. So bumpy in the numbers, but not spiky, is what one KQED reporter said this week. So be careful.
Okay, so let's turn from, sort of the state of affairs of health for all of us to one particular individual, because there have been concerns for some time about the health of Senator Dianne Feinstein. She is our senior senator here in California. And Joe, we've been hearing for some time that her health is degrading, but you reported this week that colleagues of hers in Congress are saying they are very concerned about her mental acuity at this point.
Yes, and I did this story with our Washington correspondent, Tal Koppen, and we have 4 senators, 3 of them Democrats, and these are colleagues and many of them friends of Dianne Feinstein, and 3 former staffers and 1 Democratic member of Congress. They're concerned about her memory losses. In fact, they're so concerned that they think that maybe it's time for Dianne Feinstein to step down.
Really?
This is huge.
And what are they saying? How are they seeing that memory, those memory issues play out?
We have 1 Democratic member of Congress who was recently in a long conversation over a couple of hours with Senator Feinstein. He said that usually they have very rigorous policy debates because that's the way Feinstein is. But he said that, it was mostly pleasantries, and several times she asked to reintroduce themselves to each other. And so it's sad. And many of the people in the story that we talked to declined to put their name to it because, and much of that is out of respect for Dianne Feinstein. They're concerned about her. Remember, she's a huge well of support here. She's a pioneer. She's been in office since the late 1960s, first female mayor of San Francisco, first female senator of California, along with Barbara Boxer. She is seen as a role model for many people, particularly women in politics. So it's a very sensitive story, but it's one of concern. Remember, she is the senator for 40 million people. If she can't do her job to the fullest extent, that's a serious problem.
And any word from her if she will be stepping down or stepping aside, or how she's responding to these concerns?
She released a statement to us for our story, but after it published, she spoke with the Chronicle's editorial board in an interview, and she said she has no plans to step down, and she says that she thinks this is a bunch of nothing. Part of the concern, she said, is that she lost her husband in late February. Richard Blum, he died after a long illness. She said she has been preoccupied with that. She's been going back and forth during his long illness over the last several months from California to Washington. But she says she's as engaged as ever, and she's getting the job done for Californians.
Okay. One of the most innovative projects that the state of California is taking on is looking at reparations. And the California Reparations Task Force recently sent out the eligibility requirements for who could potentially benefit from reparations. And they specifically called out descendants of chattel slavery or descendants of those who were free black people living in the United States in the 1800s. The local San Francisco Reparations Task Force leader, Eric McDonald, who we had on the show not long ago, thinks it doesn't go far enough. Now, Brian, I know that the task force met here, the state task force met here in San Francisco this week. What did you hear out of that meeting?
Well, the big action that the task force took this week was that they approved a report that they've been working on for quite some time that essentially officializes a stance that reparations are necessary and that it is important to educate Californians about why they're necessary, detailing the anti-black racism in the history of California. This meeting was the first public in-person meeting that they've held after 10 months of meeting virtually. A lot of pride for one of the task force members, Reverend Dr. Amos Brown, Third Baptist Church. He got to host this.
A fixture in San Francisco.
Oh yeah,
for
exactly.
many decades, yeah.
And I think we're going to see more meetings like this as they get this report out there and as they start working towards an actual recommendation to the state legislature next summer. And I think this is a really, really big deal because the activists want to know, okay, we're getting reports, we're getting a lot of study. This week they focused on education inequities. But what's going to happen? What will be the recommendation and what will the state legislature do?
the nation is watching this because California is once again out in front on a major issue. What we do here will resonate nationally.
The eyes of the nation are also on California as Oklahoma took a big step this week. The governor there signed a new abortion ban into law, very restrictive, abortion only in the cases of rape and incest. And the eyes of the nation are on California because we've said, hey, we're going to help women who come here to terminate their pregnancies. And we are expecting an influx of women and preparing for that. Joe, you've been reporting on this.
Absolutely. And there's a Future of Abortion Council here just to prepare for that. There's going to be a ripple effect, and it's already started in this country. When Texas enacted its restrictive laws, people were going to Oklahoma. Now that Oklahoma is shut down, people are going to go to Kansas and further out, concentric circles. That will eventually lead to tens of thousands of people coming to California for that. There's a dozen bills in the legislature right now that are seeking to address that, and people are preparing. And when Roe v. Wade is very likely to fall this summer, the Supreme Court is going to overturn it in so many ways, and that will sort of cause seismic shifts in the way healthcare is delivered in this country, and we need to be prepared for it.
Difficult news. Let's turn to some good news here as we close out this segment. One, baseball is back. Opening day was last week, and the Giants made history by putting a first female coach on the field during a game. Alyssa Nakken, one of our crew members, was actually there. We have some pictures to share with you all of that history-making moment. And after it happened, Alyssa was signing various photographs. So thank you, Linda Kagan, for those photos. Brian, tell us a little bit about this moment, what it means.
Well, what I thought was amazing was that Alyssa Nakken herself was simply asked to go and coach at first base. She stepped in, she did the job. When asked about it after the game, she knew it was a big deal, but she did say, hey, my job is to be ready, and I was ready. This was a no-brainer. This is my job. That's what she said. And the other interesting part is what led to her, being put out there, and it's that the original first base coach was ejected from the game. And that situation wasn't pretty. There was some racial undertones about what led to him being ejected. So it wasn't like the perfect moment, but it was a moment where you saw baseball doing what it does, working through the problems of our society, breaking the barriers of our society that need to be broken. And there was something very beautiful about it.
And today, the first baseman from this Padres recognized the history there and went over and shook her hand. And we were doing this on the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in baseball.
Great. And then finally, another special woman to note, Betty Reedskin recently retired as park ranger from the Rosie the Riveter National Park. And she was on the show not long ago, a few years, and spoke about race relations. Her words are resonant. We'd love to share those with our audience now.
I think that since I have lost my sense of future because I'm 96, my sense of past has been enhanced. And I am aware now that this country has been going through these cyclical periods of chaos ever since 1776, and we're in another one of them now. But it's in those times that the democracy is being redefined, and that we have access to the reset buttons, and that we're in one of those places right now. So that for me, it's very hopeful. It's very exciting because all those things that were very negative, that were very ugly, are now available to be seen by the entire nation when they used to be simply things that existed in the Black community. Now everyone sees them.
Such a treasure. All right, I wish we had more time here, but it's been a pleasure. Brian Watt with KQED, Joe Garofoli with the San Francisco Chronicle. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a special interview now with a woman who has made her mark, in part, by running political campaigns. She's managed 7 Senate campaigns and 2 presidential campaigns, and been the national co-chair for a 3rd presidential campaign, all for her brother, President Joe Biden. Valerie Biden Owens is, in fact, the first woman to have ever run an American presidential campaign, and she writes about those experiences and more in her new book, Growing Up Biden. Ms. Owens joins us now from Newark, Delaware, by Skype. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Priya, and please call me Valerie.
All right, I will. So Valerie, share with us first why you decided to write this book.
Well, I wrote the book because I loved growing up Biden. And I love to tell the stories about the relatives who are, and the characters who were in our family, and about the values that my mom and dad tried to instill in my three brothers and me, and about the grit and the optimism and the resilience that they surrounded us with growing up to make us feel confident and secure. And I think, that good stories, even sad ones, have some magic in them. And I hope maybe there's a little magic in some of these stories.
There's certainly that sense of resilience that comes through in many of the stories you share. And you talk about how your parents would say, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how quickly you get back up. I'm curious if there's a favorite memory from your childhood with President Biden that you'd like to share with us.
Oh my gosh. Well, what surfaces throughout my childhood is that my brother was so good to me. I mean, the very first memory I have is my brother putting out his hand to me and saying, "Come on, Val, we've got things to do and places to go and people to see." And we began our journey. And when we were little, he took me with him every place. And his friends would say, "Why did you bring a girl?" And his answer was, "She's not a girl. She's my sister." So I knew that I owed it to him and to myself to, to try and be the young girl and the woman that he thought I could be, because he told me that anything he could do, I could do better. And I knew that wasn't true, but I sure did try to live up to it.
Did you ever have a time in your life where you felt like you wanted a little space from your family, where you needed to have a little separation to grow independently, as a young woman, as a woman going to college?
When we grew up, we were raised with three pillars: family, faith, and a responsibility to take care of each other. My mom would always say, family's the beginning, the middle, and the end. To be a tight-knit family, though, doesn't mean that you suffocate each other and that you overpower one another. We were four children. We each were in our own lane. None wanted to be the other, and we all stuck together. So I felt safe and confident, as opposed to being sheltered or smothered by my family.
And the other siblings were all boys. You talk about in the book when you were getting to know the president's second wife, Jill Biden, that you had to sort of learn how to talk in a female way, or understand in a way that you didn't growing up, that you didn't have that sort of communication tool set readily at your disposal. And you share a story about just simply bringing tuna salad to an event.
Yeah. Well, two of my two brothers, Joe and Jim, both gave me a great gift. They married women who became truly and really my friends. My sister-in-law, Jill, is the eldest of five, and my sister-in-law, Sarah, who Jimmy Biden married, is the youngest of four. So both of them are all girl. And they had a little work to do with me because girls speak in a different language. I think boys I was more direct. So the story that I tell in the book is early on in the marriage, Jill called me. We would often have Sunday dinners together, all the families. And she said, "Would you like to bring some potato salad?" Now, to set up the background, my dream house does not have a kitchen. So I don't care what I eat. I take a tasty cake and Coca-Cola as my idea of a really good dinner. So I said to her, would I like to bring in potato salad? And I'm thinking, no, I wouldn't like to, but sure, you want me to bring potato salad? Just ask me, I'll bring potato salad. This went back and forth. And finally I said, "Jill, do you want me to bring potato salad or no?" She said, "Yeah, bring potato salad. I'll see you on Sunday. Thanks." And we both had a good laugh at it.
Would you share with us your experiences of learning to run a political campaign and really sort of owning that space as you grew into it? There are a few stories you tell in the book to speak to your sense of inexperience at the time. There's one story that really made me laugh, where a major campaign donor asked you flat out how old you were, and you told her basically you'd tell her how old you were if she told you how much she weighed.
I know, that was not one of my better moments. I learned at the switch. I mean, Joe was the first senator that he and I ever met. We had no influence. We had no money. We didn't have a structured Democratic Party in the state at the time. So we just improvised. But what we did have, we had vision, we had passion, we had the best candidate. And in 1972, our first campaign, we had the combustible relationship between youth and issues, just kind of like this last campaign in 2020. We ran against the war in Vietnam. We ran for civil rights and to save the environment, which Earth Day just started in 1970. So we were one of the first candidates to pay attention to the environment. We learned by reaching and risking. We were bold. We weren't brash, but we were bold.
Tell me more about your own evolution as a campaign manager, working in the political sphere. How did you yourself grow in that work?
Well, when I started out, women were not involved in politics per se. They opened and shut the headquarters and they made coffee. My brother pulled up a seat for me at the table in 1972, and at the table there were all men. And he pulled up a seat and he said to the men at the table, "This is my sister. She represents me. She speaks for me. What she says goes. So pay attention." So I had a lot easier time than a lot of women in breaking in. I also had, on the flip side of that, a lot of resentment. I was looked at as the token, either the token woman or the token relative. So once my brother left that room and left the head of the table, I was on my own to to learn as I went along. When you don't have money and you don't have resources, then you have to be creative. And the expression is, we thought out of the box. Well, we didn't even have a box. We just said, let's try this, let's try that.
Valerie, how connected are you and your brother these days? How often do you speak?
We speak often. I know everyone asks me that question. He is president of the United States, but he's my brother. Mm-hmm. And we've been best friends our whole life. So we are very much in touch.
In a recent interview, you stated that when your brother worked next to President Obama, that he, quote, understood the job of vice president and wore it well. I'm curious what you meant by that and your analysis of how the current vice president, Kamala Harris, is doing at the job. Is she as good a vice president as your brother was?
I don't know. You'll have to ask Joe. I respect her and I like her very much. And the role of vice president is that you are vice president. Joe always said it was the buck stopped. What was that? Harry Truman. The buck stopped with Obama. The buck stops with Joe. It is inappropriate for me, to talk about what they do or what they say. They have I can tell you though, the relationship is really good, and Joe is very proud that she agreed to stand with him and be vice president.
Let's turn to the topic of faith. You said when President Biden's son, Beau, died, your nephew, you wanted to take rocks and knock out the stained glass windows in the church. You've also shared about the importance of meeting the Pope more than once. So could you talk to us about the role faith has played in your life and in the president's life?
Well, we were raised in an Irish Catholic middle-class family where faith was not something that we expressed on Sunday when we went to Mass. I mean, we went to Catholic school, we went to Mass on Sunday, but we weren't a pious, devout family. We were a practicing Catholic family. So faith matters. And faith isn't, the structure of the church that you walk in. Faith is what you hold in your heart. And for me, I need something bigger than myself to hold on to when things are mad. Boy, was I mad. Beau, at 46 years old, is dying of glioblastoma. I mean, are you kidding me, God? What are you thinking? Why? And you realize, or I realize, that, life has a way of interrupting. And the more that you think you're in control and you hold on, the tighter your grip, the more you have to let go. And the 4 hardest words for me to say were, thy will be done. Again, it's just not something you say, it's something that you live, and you try to live to the best of I try to the best of my ability.
Valerie Biden Owens, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Technology has a deep, innovative history in Silicon Valley, and you can see some of it on display in this week's Something Beautiful. The Computer History Museum in Mountain View houses a collection of computing artifacts that preserve technological history, including, they say, 90,000 physical items, hundreds of gigabytes of software, and more than 1,000 recorded interviews. You see that glance of Pong? That was great. That's the end of our show for tonight. You can find KQED Newsroom online or on Twitter, or you can email us at knr@kqed.org. You can reach me on social media at Priya D. Clemens. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you right back here next Friday night. Have a great weekend.